Hello, everybody. Um, Today is our second Candid Conversation with Add to Colorado on Pride Beyond the Party, a conversation on advertising and the LGBTQIA plus community. My name is Rachel. I am the Add to Colorado president, she, her, and I'm so excited to present this event to you. A little bit about Add2 before we get started. Add2 Colorado is an advertising organization that's geared towards individuals under 32 looking to strengthen their skills, build their networks, and champion. As a local nonprofit, we provide networking, leadership, and educational opportunities to students and recent grads and young professionals interested in advertising, marketing, design, and every corner of the marketing world. We have many events coming up, including more candid conversations to come, and we welcome you to check out our website and learn more about how you can get involved with our networking events and our educational events for students. Without further ado, I'll let our moderator, Drew, take over and introduce himself and our panelists for this evening.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Drew Peterson, he, him. I am located in Denver, and I currently work on the client strategy team with Tinuiti. I also serve on the board of directors with Ad Club Colorado, and I'm really excited to be moderating Add2's Candid Conversations Pride Beyond the Party tonight. We've got an incredible lineup of panelists ready to discuss all things LGBTQIA+ in our marketing and advertising worlds. And we hope you as the audience finds this to be an interesting, authentic, and thought-provoking conversation filled with unique perspectives. We want you to walk away and feel like you've learned something from the conversation to help affect positive change in our community tomorrow. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to leave them in the chat box to the right, and we'll try to get to your questions throughout the session. Otherwise, feel free to hang around and mingle at the remote tables afterwards, where our panelists will be hanging out to answer any of your questions or discuss any feedback. Let's dive in and give each panelist the chance to give a brief introduction on themselves. And in addition to that, I'm also going to do a little icebreaker here. I'd like each of the panelists to give a brief thought on the current state of rainbow washing in America as it relates to marketing and advertising. So really quick, rainbow washing could be defined as the act of using or adding rainbow colors and or imagery to advertising, apparel, accessories, landmarks, etc., in order to indicate progressive support for our community, but with possibly minimum effort or pragmatic results. Some would argue that they appreciate the effort or support from brands and organizations, but others would feel like that this rainbow washing feels somewhat performative and perhaps even lazy. So let's hear from the panelists themselves. Graham, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
10-year-old me loves rainbow washing. Like, you know, when you grow up and you're like looking for anything that might slightly be gay. Like, so 10-year-old me loves it. I'm recently finding that like 42-year-old me is okay with it because wow, we can see through it now. Every meme is like about awareness of this. Like people will not like, they're like, what now? It's like that's the only thing. And every once in a while, someone's just like, here's a corporate thing, but everyone else is just making fun of corporate things. We are shifting towards impact versus intent and pageantry. And whoa, that's very exciting.
Awesome. And Graham, could you give us a brief intro on yourself?
Yes, I launched right into it. I got very excited, like 10-year-old me would have. Graham Nolan, he, him. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I am the co-chair for storytelling and partnerships of an organization called Do the Work. Some people sort of think of it as the ad color or 3% movement of the LGBTQIA community for advertising. What GLAD is to what shows up on camera, we are trying to be to what is happening behind the camera to make sure that queer representation and share of voice and creativity are being properly supported within advertising agencies and larger advertising community, so that the messages that come through are very authentic and representative. And we do this, you know, we're trying to be inclusive of every part of the LGBTQIA rainbow, in addition to every level of advertising, from big agencies to small agencies to freelancers to people who are working as advertising professionals within like platforms and brands. We have data, we have newsletters, we have programming, we have sessions. We're trying to cover a lot, but that's the organization.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Graham. We're so happy to have you tonight.
Yeah.
Up next, Jordan.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here this evening. And that's a great question on rainbow washing. I feel like, looking at myself and looking inward as someone who hopes to be an advocate for the community, I've realized that there's a difference between supporting communities and protecting communities, because support can mean so many things, and it's very, very important work. And protecting the communities means taking it further to ensure that communities don't become more and more vulnerable as time goes on. And so listen, give me all the rainbow flag beer koozies. Like, I love them so much. But I think that as advocates, we need to be asking questions, real questions, to corporations that come out to support Pride. It's great they're there to promote our community, but at the same time, what are they doing internally? Are they giving to LGBTQIA plus focused causes? Are they advocating for legislation that benefits our community and protects our community? We need to be asking those questions as we go forward. And do you want me to introduce myself? Is that what's happening?
Would love that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. My name is Jordan Alvillar. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I work for the Anti-Defamation League, Mountain States Regional Office. It's otherwise known as the ADL. And the ADL is a historic civil rights-based organization that was actually originally founded to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure fair treatment and justice to all. And our work is incredibly expansive. And in addition to fighting anti-Semitism in the US and globally, we combat extremism, including domestic extremism and online hate, and we confront discrimination by working tirelessly to ensure that there are comprehensive hate crime laws in every single state. And we also promote respectful schools and communities by providing anti-bias education. So I know that that's a mouthful, but just very excited to be here, and shout out to Add2 Colorado for hosting us tonight, and also our fabulous moderator, Drew, for guiding the discussion.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Excited to hear your perspective. Fern, let's hear from you and your thoughts on rainbow washing.
Awesome. So thank you, Drew. My name is Fern Senra-James, he, him. And I'm a managing director at Moore. We're an integrated communications agency headquartered in Tallahassee. We have offices in West Palm Beach, New Orleans, and Denver. So my particular background is one in healthcare, and I've really had the opportunity to work a lot in pharmaceutical research and access. I also serve as the in-house counsel for MD&I for both our internal initiatives and for our client projects. On a personal note, my husband and I have been married for 5 years, together for 20, and we live in Tallahassee. When it comes to rainbow washing, I feel like over the past year, on just so many different social issues, everyone's BS-ometer has kind of readjusted a bit. And I think it's really become a kind of a perspective of, you can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. And I feel like now, obviously everyone's a little more hypercritical about what messaging you're putting out there, and people want to see that you are relevant and that you are compassionate and that you are authentic in what the message that you're putting out there. So, I like the other panelists really do appreciate those companies that are putting themselves out there and showing some support. But I feel like more than anything, they really need to put their money where their mouth is and really it goes beyond just putting a rainbow up as your icon, and it really has to be a lot more behind that.
Awesome. Thank you, Fern.
Thanks, Drew.
Vanellope.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Vanellope Santibanez. Pronouns are her and she. I work for the Don't Look Back Center, which is a nonprofit organization that helps primarily women and trans women who are suffering from. When I think about pink washing, I find it really funny that it's mainly in June where I start getting a bunch of, because I like to shop a lot, so I start getting a bunch of promotional emails saying, like, putting the flag basically Pride Month, and I believe it shouldn't just be in a month. It should be the whole year. It should be year round. It like I feel like meant and then it goes away, you know. So I feel that they could I agree with everyone. They could do more and put their money where their mouth is. So yeah.
Thank you, Vanellope. We're so happy to have you. And lastly, Terrance.
Hi, what's going on, guys? My name's Tim. I am a social community manager with R&R Partners. But before I get into that, I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts on rainbow washing. It's tough because it's like I'm so happy to have felt recognized from people, right? But it's like I hope that I have more faith in the community that they are trying to appeal to, that they'll see right through it. We already see through each other's BS when it comes to certain things. What makes you think we're not going to see through your ad or something that you're selling to us? And I think that it's really up to them. If they're going to keep it up, you're going to see what your ROI is, and that's going to tell you right away. Did you hit the mark or did you not? So obviously, my thoughts are keep it going, because we're going to keep the party going no matter what. We have work to do, and we're going to see right past what you're trying to pull on us. So those are my thoughts on that. And just to get a bit into what I do social community management for R&R Partners, which is a full-service advertising branding company based in Las Vegas. We have 9 separate offices, ranging from DC to Mexico City, to Phoenix, to LA, and also I'm missing a few, but you guys get the gist. We're well-rounded. We have a couple offices, and I have the pleasure of being the online voice of Vegas. I work on a really amazing client for the Las Vegas Visitor and Conventions Authority on the LVCVA. And you guys are probably familiar with what happens here stays here. The world-renowned campaign that really put Vegas on the globe. And I get to help, visitors navigate through the city, help them figure out if Vegas is for them, which Vegas is for everybody. I'm selling it right now. But I hope to see all of you guys soon. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also doing a lot of community work. I'm a community organizer. I also am a digital engagement co-chair for the Human Rights Campaign chapter, and also work with the NAACP. I'm trying to make that connection between young Black professionals and also just young Black youth in general, trying to show them that there's opportunity just right here in our community and just having conversations that are natural. So that's pretty much what I do.
Thank you so much, Terrance. We're so happy to have you. We've got this incredible panelists, obviously unique perspectives coming from every which way. So without further ado, guys, I'm just going to dive right into some questions. Starting out a little bit broad here, but I want to hear from you guys. Do you think advertising is a non-inclusive industry? Why or why not? And I'm actually going to pass it right back to you, Terrance, to start us off with this one.
I think just starting out, I honestly never knew the depth of advertising and where its start happened, what the essence was, the genesis. And now that I've become a bit more well-versed in it, the answer is simply no. Because there's a track record that we are just not, we're not count the buying power of certain groups, right? So it's like we're kind of backpedaling, doing our research, figuring out because we weren't selling to this market doesn't mean that there wasn't money there. You were purposely creating campaigns that didn't appeal to them. And that's why there was no engagement. That's why there was no buying power, because there was nothing to get people motivated to buy. So I'm realizing that has a huge play into how things are kind of decided in budgets. Budgets are everything, I'm learning.
Awesome. Thanks for your perspective on that. Jordan, do you have anything to add there?
So I don't work in advertising any longer, but I did. But I think that I'm going to sidestep this question just a little bit because I'm going to look at it from the lens of, can the advertising sector be more inclusive? The answer is yes, absolutely. Could the nonprofit sector be more inclusive? Yes, absolutely. I think when we realize and understand that these issues that we're facing are really systemic, we realize that there's a whole ton of work to do, and every industry certainly has room to improve, for sure.
Awesome. Anybody else have anything to add on that?
I feel like I have something somewhere in the middle, maybe. Just in terms, like it's sort of funny to me. I agree that we can be more inclusive. I also agree that we're not. I think that the key is becoming designed or redesigned to be inclusive. I think that a lot of people expected something that will naturally happen, or that it would just naturally happen, as we've sort of like, we look at other bits of progress that advance in our society, and we're like, well, that will make its way in here. Like if they're talking about Black Lives Matter outside, that will sort of sort itself out here, and I will support it as a CEO at the top levels, and then everyone else will figure it out. And it's like, nope, that's not how it works. So now you've got a lot of like established companies that need to learn how to redesign themselves for inclusion. And I think, by the way, the number one key in that is to include all levels of your organization. I think that the junior employees, or the ones that are less tenured, are the ones who are DEI natives. Just the same as they are digital natives. They grew up with a digital phone and a computer phone, and they also grew up with the vocabulary of inclusion. So they should be leading this conversation. And then there's a lot of great opportunities for, like, if there are companies being inclusive, it's because they're probably newer, and they probably knew to design themselves for that. So when you see companies that are really doing it, you're like, oh, wow. It's like, well, yeah, they made it part of the mission. So they didn't just expect it to happen.
Awesome. That's super interesting perspective. Thank you for that, Graham.
Yeah.
Now, Fern, I want to hear a little bit more, knowing your background, I want to hear a little bit more about how you produce or contribute to like a diverse workplace within your organization. How has that evolved over time for you?
So one of the great things that I'm very fortunate with is to be part of a company that has evolved. And I love that you use that word evolve, because that was my thought kind of in this situation as well. So I've previously had jobs in my career where my employers, didn't prioritize diversity or really see the value of having those varying perspectives at the table, at the decision-making tables. In the last 12 years that I have been at Moore, I've not only seen my colleagues become more diverse in gender, race, sexual orientation, identity, but I've seen a leadership team that's committed to inclusion and ensuring that everyone can be their authentic selves at work. And that just means so much. So, part of my role and my focus on MD&I is working to promote representation through each and every person I bring into the company. Though I'm not part of our leadership team, I'm over our internship program and have been for years. And really what I do over that is making sure that, that new generation that I bring into our company, that serves as our junior colleague kind of feeder pool. Anyone who comes in to the company at that junior level comes in through that internship program. So by bringing in diverse talent at that level, I'm doing my part to promote that new generation of colleagues that look differently, that have different experiences and perspectives. And I really do think that it does just make us all better. And we have a great retention rate within our agency, where we've seen interns really just stay with us and grow in their careers. I mean, even our president is a former intern. So I always like to tell interns, one day you can be the president of this company. So I think just the fact that, bringing in that more diverse talent pool that is bound to stick with us at some level and have some good retention rate throughout is just beneficial to us all.
Great. Thank you for that. And it's great to be with an organization where you feel like you can do good things and contribute to the good things happening around you. And going back to you, Terrance, it sounds like R&R has done a lot, and has evolved over time as well. Do you think that there are still some significant barriers that exist for R&R specifically? And like, or as an industry, what are some of the biggest obstacles that you think that we could try to overcome still?
Yeah, I think just like you guys mentioned, it is a beautiful thing to be a part of a company that is evolving and that has put, my voice in rooms that I never even thought I'd be welcome in. And I think that them taking that approach and, like Graham mentioned before too, like tapping into some of the newer people who are starting at the agency and seeing what their perspective is and kind of checking out what the landscape is and certain topics and things like that has been a huge part of our strategy. And I didn't even realize that until I had kind of saw how these things were folding out. And it's just so cool to be a part of that, because I've also in my kind of like short time span of my career now, I've worked for companies where this wasn't a conversation that you have. You don't talk about being a part of different communities. You aren't welcome to have a different perspective. You are there to do your job, clock in at 8 and see you at 5. Time, do what you're asked, and that was kind of it. And when I was kind of invited into this new environment where it was kind of like, be who you are, shine to be a rainbow, or be quiet if that's your thing. Like whatever you want to do it, but do it well and do it with heart. And I think that was just eye-opening to me because it was so hard to get involved in the conversations that were happening with like employee resource groups and planning pride events. And I was like, oh, well, should I say anything? Should I raise my hand? Do I show up to that meeting? Where it was like, no, we're waiting for you. Where are you? And it was really cool to have that kind of energy to go into. R&R is definitely a leader when it comes to that and taking that approach. I think as an industry, we definitely, we have a lot of work to do, but I really think it's in processes. It's in your talent, it's simple things like that where it's, we do have a lot of leaders that are still, if it's not broke, don't fix it, and it may not be broke for you. That's what people forget. So I think that's just, a conversation that we're constantly having at my agency, and always just looking for new ways to just push the barrier, change processes, and share ideals.
Yeah, definitely. It's really great to hear about that. Thank you for your perspective there. I want to bring up the topic of intersectionality. And this will be something that we kind of discuss over the next few questions. Before I do that, though, I'm just going to provide a textbook definition just to provide a little clarity before we do start this discussion. So intersectionality, the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. With that said, what does intersectionality mean to you guys? I want to hear a little bit more about that. Jordan, would you mind starting us off?
Ooh, sure. So a little bit of background for those who don't know. Intersectionality is actually a term that was coined by Kimberly Williams Crenshaw, who spent more than 35 years studying civil rights, race, and racism. And it seems like we've only really been hearing this term in the last few years, but it was actually born in 1989 and launched into mainstream education only recently. And when Crenshaw talks about intersectionality, she uses the visual of a prism, which I really like because it brings to light the different types of problems that exist in society. And also, it must be noted that this term was coined with the clear intention of centering the experiences and challenges of Black women specifically. And I think it's really important to name that because as we continue to see and use this term, it's critical that we remember that it was actually born with the intention to advocate for and protect Black women because they have not been for so long. So to me, it really attempts to present what not only is true, but hold us accountable and understanding that within marginalized communities, these communities can experience many layers of discrimination, whether it's pertaining to their gender, their race, their sexual orientation, their religion, and beyond. And many times, those experiences intersect with one another.
Thank you so much for that. Fern, let's hear from you. What does intersectionality mean to you?
So stemming off of what Jordan just shared, I feel that the term intersectionality, it really was one that I feel like resonated with me from the very first time that it became part of our common lingo, especially over the past couple of years. To your point, Jordan, you shared that it's like a prism, and that's kind of how I see it too. That you don't just have to be one dimensional. There are so many different aspects of your life. Some come with challenges all their own. Others, might not be. But I really do believe that term, for me at least, is showing that there is more to me than just the one term that someone might use for me. I'm not just a gay man. I'm not just a Cuban American. On top of that, I'm not just someone who likes to cook and is bad at math. I can be all of these things, be myself, accept the challenges that come with it. Through this term intersectionality, really see and understand all of the challenges that each one of those brings with it. But really at that intersection of all of these things is me. And that's something that, I think throughout my whole life and to this point of, being 41, that I can, really see myself as a more complete person, understanding what some of the difficult challenges of parts of my life are and how they interact with each other. But I think by having them all out on the table and really understanding that that's what makes me me, I think just makes me stronger.
I kind of intersectionality when Terrance mentioned conversations that he never thought that we would have and now we're having them in the room. I see intersectionality as the last one of the conversations that people still don't really want to have. We all engage in it because we're in the business of it. But wow, I work in corporate PR, and when we're having diversity conversations and I bring up maybe we should also address intersectionality, the way they sidestep that, it's still very Jordan, you mentioned it's a recent prominent in terms of pop culture. I feel like people, because they don't have a grasp on what it means yet and they're not experts in it, they don't want to talk about it and consider that most of the time when you're calling upon leaders to talk about stuff, it is stuff that they're experts on. So I think the subject scares the hell out of them. I also think that the good thing about it is also the thing that scares them, because when I think of intersectionality, I think it's that there's always more, right? It's what Fern's specifically talking about in the different levels of him as a person, and of me as a person, and we've all got these different layers to us. I think that I would think that leaders who are hesitant to change think they finally got something figured out, where they're just okay, well, I've got this program for LGBTQ people and that's all good, and I've got them figured out. And then it's okay, well, have you thought about it from the perspective of queer people of color? And they're there's more. It's there's always more. This I love the mind-blowing, because it's sort of funny too, because that's reflective of the fact that with Black Lives Matter, some white people are sort of going, oh, we're going to have to deal with this forever. And it's yeah. So intersectionality is the beauty of there's always more. But then I think for people who are sort of afraid of change, it's oh, wow, I'm going to have to work on this forever. So we've got to make sure to give people perspective on that. This is an ongoing struggle. We all have to figure out how to figure out together.
Thank you for adding that. It's really interesting to kind of hear all of you guys talk about the recency aspect of it and just kind of what it means to each of you individually. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. Vanellope, I want to hear a little bit more from you around why this concept, or why intersectionality itself, is important to consider in the workplace. What does that mean to you?
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again?
Yeah, of course. I'm curious as to why intersectionality would be important in the workplace to you. How does that affect you? What does it mean to you?
First, I'm going to be honest with you. This is probably the first time I've ever heard this word. So you are all educating me on this word. So what it seems like to me, I feel that he just stated, he said that you put all the how would you say it? The LGBTQ plus you feel that you think you have them all figured out, but in reality it's like a whole flag of like I fall into that category as transgender. I'm representing the transgender community. So I just feel that sorry.
Oh, you're okay.
I'm a little nervous. I just feel that we do need to see more into it, like as far as it just being LGBTQ plus. Like there's way more to it.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your perspective there. And I can think we're all in agreement that it goes much more beyond what we think it does. And it requires more work and more attention or time for this truly to take effect. So I appreciate your perspective. Terrance, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I really do see its importance in the workplace just because this is going to be able to save so much time and effort from the things that could go bad by not acknowledging are not one flavor. You know, we all have a lot of layers to each other and to ourselves. And so I think that we're going to have conversations that are going to go much further and affect our work and help us produce, you know, great strategies and things like that. We just need to be aware and really that this is a kaleidoscope we're looking at and not just, you know, colors flat out.
Absolutely.
It goes a lot deeper.
Much deeper.
Vanellope's comment made me realize just one of the biggest issues I saw, especially at big organizations with affinity groups. And affinity groups are great and they do wonderful things. And it's like, let's pull all the LGBTQ people together. But, you know, Vanellope, what you referenced is the fact that, like, you know, there's nuance within our community and we keep lumping ourselves together. What always happens is we go, well, you know, the LGBTQIA plus group is going to teach everyone else how to become allies and do this stuff. And we're going to do it this way. And we're going to do it this way. And if there happens to be like a cis gay white man at the head of that organization, which keeps happening at advertising agencies, like what never happens is going like, oh, by the way, among the people in this room, in this group, can we talk about our different perspectives? Like there's this assumed like we're all under this rainbow flag, so we must all agree on this. So I'm going to state something and no one's going to argue that, right? Instead of like first sort of going, let's find a way to bring out in this group of people in this room the differences in our experiences. Like there's just no toolkit for that. And it's really damaging, kind of.
Absolutely. That's, again, it's just so much deeper and things are just miscategorized and misrepresented a lot of times. So again, it's just really interesting to kind of hear all of you guys bringing your unique perspectives to the table here. I just want to throw out more of an action-oriented question just to see if you guys have any thoughts. I know I've heard kind of each of you sprinkle comments in here, but how can we as professionals in our industries, how can we promote and sustain intersectionality like in our industry specifically? Is there anything immediate that comes to mind?
Drew, I'll jump in. I feel like, you know, part of our responsibility as professionals in this industry is when clients come to us for, you know, developing a campaign, for developing messaging that goes along with you know, whatever it is that we're communicating on their behalf. I think weaving this into that message and making sure that, you know, the channels that we're using to share this message kind of brings all of that perspective in. A lot of these clients, you know, may not give that much thought to this whole concept of intersectionality, but I feel like within our counsel, within the messaging that we put forth and how to really capture and reach these target audiences, I feel like if we bring in that theme of intersectionality in there, I feel like that's how we can best move the needle in that space.
Yeah, great to hear that perspective, Fern. Thank you for sharing that. Which kind of takes me to my next topic, if you will. I want to talk a little bit more about like representation. In a broad sense, I want to hear from you guys around how you feel our community, our LGBTQIA plus community is represented in the workplace, in marketing and advertising, the industry as a whole. I know we've already touched on this, that it's changed over time. It's changed probably quite a bit in the past 10 to 20 years. So how do you feel that how do you feel we currently sit today? And where do you think we could go? Fern, I'm gonna pass that actually right back to you.
Sure. I think that there's always work that we need to do. And I don't think we are where we need to be right now. I would love to get to the point where companies across all industries, including ours, are purposely bringing on members of our community because they know that our perspectives and experiences are going to add to the quality of work and to the overall just even company atmosphere. I'm not looking to be the token gay person at an agency. Just, I want our perspectives to be sought out purposely because they recognize that it's important to have people of varying perspectives, experiences, because it's just going to make everything better. It's going to make our work better. It's going to make our colleague interactions better. But I don't think we're there yet. I think that, certain companies, of course, are making strides and are committed to being better. And I think that that's, what we can't ask for more than that. But I feel that we need to get more companies at that level.
Yeah, thank you for that, Fern. Jordan, I know your work at the ADL is super interesting and you've got this experience that I just want to hear a little bit more about. Even outside of the advertising world, how do you feel that representation in general of our community has grown? And there's obviously still a room for opportunity. So tell us a little bit more about how that looks from your perspective.
That's a really great question. And I don't want to speak about industries as a monolith, but I once heard representation framed by a writer, Teresa Ruth Howard, and it really resonated with me. And it was that marginalized communities shouldn't be made to feel as though we should be grateful to have a seat at the table because that's where we've always belonged, but that we expect to eat and we also want to help plan the menu, right? So to me, as far as the opportunity for growth, true representation is really working to ensure that all people have a voice no matter what. And leadership, specifically of each company and organization, is providing that safe environment where people can utilize those voices. And I want to expand on that because I think it's important, because when it comes from leadership, that's important, but there's still going to be that power dynamic that's at play, right? And so what leadership really needs to do is say, listen, we're going about this. We need you to hold us accountable, right? And we need you all to hold each other accountable, because once we open up and kind of implode that power dynamic, that's where people can really start to feel safe to utilize their voice, because it's really, really important. As far as how representation has grown, I mean, I think it's hard to really quantify it. I mean, I think that it really comes down to the experiences of our communities. And there certainly is a strong difference between tokenization and representation. And like I was kind of hinting at before, tokenization is really just to check a box, but representation is where we're really utilizing the voices and the talents of the people that we're bringing in with strong intent. So I apologize that I'm not really able to answer that specific question, but I just hope that it continues to grow and grow and grow to where, listen, if I'm watching TV and in every single TV show, there's a LGBTQ plus character, I mean, I'm really into that, right? Like, so let's keep doing it.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there. And it's definitely interesting to think about it in a way of, tokenization versus representation, like you said. And even going back, that concept, like the power dynamic, I love to hear you talk about that, because it truly is a dynamic solution to hopefully hold people accountable, like you said. So thank you for sharing that, Jordan. Vanellope, I wanted to hear a little bit from you around how you feel representation for the LGBTQIA plus community has grown, and what does an opportunity for growth look like to you?
Well, I do believe we have come a long way. It's nice to drive somewhere and see a billboard and recognize somebody from a show, that represents the LGBT community. But as far as the trans community, I think that we still have a lot of work to do, because it goes back to that intersectionality. That just because they're supporting the LGBT community, it's like, no, we do go way beyond that, and I feel that we still have a lot of work to do. So yeah, it's changing, but we still got some work to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your perspective there. Terrance, anything to add on representation, growth, and opportunity for growth?
Yeah, I think everyone kind of hit on it already, but I think that we're just going to kind of hopefully keep seeing more stories being told. I think for me, being a person who just loves that art of storytelling, we're missing out still on so many just like fundamental stories that a lot of us do share. They're not always pretty either, and they still are stories that need to be shared. So I think that even if you could work those into your creative approach, or if you can find a way to be vulnerable in the workplace as someone who's able to contribute to the idea, or pitch something to a client, this is the moment to shine, baby, because they got to know that your story has happened and it's real. And I'm realizing now that it's just one of those things that it's uncomfortable, but this is that opportunity that we keep asking about. This is the opportunity to bring the representation to the table, because your story, it hit someone in the feels, or it just really is going to get a message across for our clients. So I hope that we can all do together in that sense.
Absolutely. And, hearing those stories, it is so interesting, because it really connects you to something that you may not be familiar with, or someone else's story that a lot of the times you don't get to hear, especially for a marginalized community. So super important. So thank you for sharing that. Any other comments on representation?
It was Jordan framed it in terms of the power dynamic, because so it's really funny. One of the reasons work, we talked about the table, and there, I heard my friend Rashida do this podcast where she was just like, there wasn't a table, so I need to build a table. It's like, yes, we need to build a damn table and stand up on it ourselves and like scream that we're here, and that's still the name of the game sometimes. But like in terms of leadership support, it's so funny. I still feel like we get called in for I was like writing my words down to make sure I got them right. Like we're still called in for the release of tension, but not for the building of futures. Like we've all been a part of all company meetings where it's just like, something terrible has happened to this community. We need to pull together. We need to make sure you're all okay. And like, and is everyone okay? Is everyone okay? Like, it's a weird, like everyone has to feel good to keep, doing the work. And then like, but then it's like, when is the all hands meeting to address like, okay, now we're going to talk about how queer people can like build a future and what it means to do something for them. And it's like, that never quite happens. Like, because we get called up when it's like, well, it's Pride, we need you for this to relieve the tension of this. And so again, it's like, if you build your own table, you can stand on it whenever. It would be nice to be called upon for something other than crisis relief by people who are in power, but like we're working on it.
Totally. And super interesting to hear that. Thank you, Graham. So the next topic is an important topic, and it's a topic that a lot of us like to talk about, especially during Pride Month. But I really want to chat about advocacy, and I was really curious to hear everyone's perspective here on advocacy, especially with the past year and a half. We've been socially distancing and a lot less active, haven't been traveling for quite some time. People haven't just been up to much. So a lot of people, a lot of allies in general, they want to know, how can they show up for the LGBTQIA plus community? What does that look like today? And how might that be different from a year and a half ago before COVID? Jordan, tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I think what's really exciting about this time for advocacy is that there's so many ways that we can show up. But I think that people tend to forget that, because we kind of saw that during the pandemic, just because people were stuck at home, they perhaps weren't couldn't be physically showing up in the ways that they were used to, whether it was to a march or a protest or to volunteer. And those are really beautiful ways to show up, but you can also be an advocate in different ways, right, that are just as important. And I'm going to repeat some things that you already know. And the reason why they're repeated so much is because they haven't lost their value. One is to donate to organizations who are advocating directly for the LGBTQIA plus community, because, and also bonus, if it's a local organization, that's great, because supporting the queer folks in your own backyard is critical. The second one is vote. Please vote. And then 3 is find ways to reach out to your members of Congress and urge them to reject legislation that is harmful to our community or support legislation that is helpful to our community. And I can't even begin to explain to you how easy it is to do this. You can call their direct line and leave a message. You can write an email. You can meet with them virtually or peer-to-peer. I mean, the opportunities are endless. So I know that those aren't necessarily new ways to show up, but they're so critical to really impact change.
Thank you so much for that, Jordan. And although they may not be new, like you said, they hold their value. They're more important now than ever. So yeah, donate, vote, connect, and meet, and be inspired. I feel a little bit of positive energy just injected into me after hearing that. So thank you for sharing your perspective there. Fern, let's hear a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Drew, I think you hit the nail on the head, just, and when you said that over the past year and a half, our kind of felt like our worlds have somewhat shrunk and kind of losing a little bit of your sense of community, just because you're not seeing those faces on a regular basis. You're, a little more to yourself and maybe more at home. And I think, we've all felt that, of course. But now, it's more important than ever to step up and support one another. I think the points that you brought up, Jordan, are just so important. And I'm glad you didn't just, brush those under the bed just because it's things that we've heard. It's things we need to hear and we need to continue to hear because it's what moves the needle. I think in addition to that, I would say a way for people to show up to support this community, and I say to support our community and how we can support each other, is commit to learning about our community and listen to what's important to us. Don't make assumptions. And I think that all of these things, it's kind of starting with that foundation, will then lead to all of these other advocacy pieces of it that will get you out there voting, will get you out there supporting candidates who are, supporting policies that, seek to aim discrimination and really advance our rights. I think, Vanellope, you brought up a great point of earlier where you said, don't just lump everyone into that LGBTQIA plus category. Like, really get to know each one of these because it's so easy to lump us all into one. But each of those letters stands for something so huge and so many different perspectives. And I think that the more we learn about what makes that umbrella, the more passionate we will become and the more willing we will be to support those candidates, to get out there and vote, to contact members of Congress and really fight for that whole spectrum. So I really, I urge people to really, if you want to show up, start with educating yourself and really listen to the people.
Thanks for that, Fern. Yeah, listening and learning. It's a fairly simple concept when you think about it, but
listening gets you
really
far.
Goes exactly. So I really appreciate that. Vanellope, want to hear a little bit more about how you think people can show up, for our community, and what does that look like today? Is that any different from pre-pandemic?
Yeah, it definitely has changed a lot, especially with everything going on in the world. But it goes back to what Fern said. I think educating yourself, knowing who you're supporting, like doing your homework. It goes above, like, it's way more than just like putting us in one box and saying, "Oh, it's okay." There's bunch to us. So, yeah, we've come a long ways, and I think by doing that, you're supporting us already, and you're understanding us, and you're gonna like he said, you're gonna want to make us. What would you say? Sorry, I can't find my words. Just how I don't necessarily want to say happy, just and not just basically educate yourself. Just
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, yeah.
It just really is so important. And I know you were kind of building off what Fern was saying, but like, I think this is such a key consistent learning that I'm hearing from each and every one of you is educate yourself, learn about our community, go beyond the assumptions that a lot of us are already familiar with, you know, like take a moment to really to learn and to empathize. And that's how you can potentially, you know, really become an authentic, genuine advocate for the community. Graham, just wanted to see if you had any thoughts to add there.
Talk about the listening thing forever. We've got so much planned in terms of listening. When we were going to launch as a conference because we were like, and we were hesitant at first to maybe do that because we're like, a conference feels like an announcement, right? We were like, no, wait. This would maybe be the first time that like 300 LGBTQIA plus advertising professionals was in a room. And it brings a scale that those ERGs couldn't. So you're never just the only one of a group in the room, right? So we're still going to do a conference. Listening is still at the core of this. I admittedly got sidetracked by Jordan's list. And the reason why is because you're beautifully articulating this list of things that are needed for like community-based action, and all of the behaviors you list out of if you just in a vacuum sound like political activism, right? And that scares the hell out of the advertising and marketing world. And in fact, so many conversations I have about this, they're like, well, you know, but it's not political and the work isn't political. And it's like, isn't it? Like, aren't we the industry that prides ourselves on being like in touch with every aspect of culture? We know everything about them. We cater to what people want. We hear them. We understand them. But we're not catering to their political needs. It's like, yes, you are. And we also know that in politics, that the lack of action is some sort of action, right? So if you're choosing to be apolitical as a company, you are choosing to be apolitical like the uncle who doesn't take a side at Thanksgiving, but in a way has taken a side by not taking a side. So I think that, you know, the reason, Drew, that you acknowledge it, like, wow, you know, Jordan, those are classic things that just haven't quite happened. It's like, I think part of the life cycle of that will be companies admitting that we are connected to politics in some way and that we are not neutral, and that in our inaction, we are not neutral.
So interesting to hear that perspective, Graham, because it is evident, it's out there, it's happening amongst us. And just to hear you say like taking a side without taking a side probably rings true to a lot of people in various ways. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to hear a little bit more about some specific examples. If you guys have one that you'd like to share around advocacy that you maybe have seen or experienced in your career, I want to hear a little bit more about this example of advocacy. Why was it so impactful to you? Does anybody have an example they'd like to share? Jordan?
Sure. I mean, if no one else wants to go at this moment. I touched on this before, but meeting either virtually or peer-to-peer with your senators and representatives is a super important way to impact change. And through ADL, I actually facilitate a leadership program for individuals who are passionate about furthering their work in civil rights. And through that program, we spend time lobbying anti-hate legislation with our local officials. And lobbying is just an incredible way to help push forward new laws, secure funding for community programs, secure new regulations, and also new policies. And it's been really powerful for me to watch people go through the process, mostly for the first time, and utilize their voice to advocate for the issues and organization and communities that they really care about. And if you're wondering, yes, lobbying is something that many people do professionally, but you don't need to be a professional lobbyer to meet with your elected officials. And local organizations are always super eager to utilize the voices of community members to support the legislation that they are a part of, whether it's to meet with elected officials, to or to testify in front of Congress. And if you're wondering if Congress really listens, actually someone told me this recently, that a recent study from the Congressional Management Foundation found that 94% of congressional staff stated that an in-person visit from a constituent was the most likely way to sway a member's opinion on any given issue. So it really, really does matter.
Certainly. That's very, very interesting to hear that. So thank you for sharing that perspective there. So I've seen some questions trickle in from the Q&A, and I just want to make sure that we can get to them before getting into our final set of questions. So really quick, I'm going to make this one open-ended for whoever would like to answer it. Coming in from the Q&A, do you think the media is doing its part to ensure representation of the LGBTQIA plus community? Do you think the media is doing their part to ensure this representation is authentic, rather?
I'll start with a big nope, because they're not letting us tell our own stories. They are doing it when they are giving us the platform. I gave the parallel before about like where we are in relation to GLAAD. So GLAAD is this organization that's like a media watchdog group, right? And they sort of say, well, this is how, like, we're in characters, queer characters with speaking roles are in 4% of television shows, but we're 5.6% of the country, and where's the disparity? My organization comes in terms of, like, I always give the example of, like, maybe there's an ad for the lesbian community and it's not good. And everyone sort of goes like, you can tell that there wasn't a lesbian in the room for that. It's so inauthentic. It's so fake. Like, where was the lesbian in that room? And everyone's just, and the call from the industry becomes, find the lesbians and hire them and have them in the room, and everyone applauds because that is the right answer. But also what no one has explored before is, well, wait, maybe she is in the room. Maybe she does not feel comfortable coming out. Maybe she is giving her input and she is being dismissed. There's this entire like black hole in terms of the data and the study of like what's happening on the back end in the advertising and marketing world to make sure that when things get pushed out, that the representation is there. So I guess this is the most like self-promoting like part of this I'll say, which is to say if anyone wants to be a part of that progress and that study, please join up with Do the Work, and the website is in the chat. But like, it is because I don't think that we're doing representation right that this organization exists.
It's so interesting to hear that, Graham. And like you said, it's really important to think about what's happening on the back end, to take a step back, because we think we know what's going on, we know what the problem is, and we happen to have this solution to fix it. But really, we need to take a step back and just see what truly is, who's being represented on the back end. So thank you for that. And amazing things happening over at Do the Work. So thanks for giving us some perspective there as well.
Yeah, of course.
Fern, did you have anything to add to that question?
Graham, as you were speaking, my mind kind of went to, I feel like from a media perspective, we're in that tokenism as opposed to representation. And that's what we're trying to flip. So the fact that, I think we can identify that that's where we are when we look at media as a whole, just is evidence that it needs to change. We need to work on that. They need to work on that. So I think we just need to flip that on its head.
Yeah, thank you for that, Fern. And I'm actually going to build off of something you just mentioned here, because our next Q&A question coming in is, what can you do when you notice that someone is being tokenized at work? Fern, do you have an answer for that question that you'd like to share?
I think if you feel that someone is being tokenized in kind of the work setting, and I feel like there isn't a one size fits all, because I think there are so many different factors that goes into that. Is the person who is being tokenized, do they feel comfortable with you maybe talking to them about this and seeing if that's how they feel too? Is the leadership of that company or supervisors, are they open to hearing feedback? And are they willing to kind of work with that? So I feel like you have to consider, it's multi-layered. And I think you need to take all of those things into consideration before, you take action. But assuming that all things are in a good place and intentions are perhaps where they should be. I think it's something that needs to be addressed. And you know, I think you may have, I don't want to give the benefit of the doubt to that leadership of an organization's leadership, but maybe calling them out on it might get them to the point where they realize, you know what, I didn't realize I was doing that I was trying to give this person a platform, but I didn't realize that in doing so, I was treating them as the token person as opposed to an actual, you know, voice with an experience and a perspective that should be of value, as opposed to me just kind of giving that, you know, just, oh, well, look, we can check the box. We have someone here for that, that type of thing. So I think there are a lot of factors to take into consideration. And if it's something that you feel comfortable bringing up, either with that person or with those, you know, in kind of a leadership role, I think it's something that that we have that responsibility to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Fern. Here's an interesting question we've got coming in from Q&A. How, panelists, do you feel about the brands using stock footage to appear diverse? Is this ever not tokenism? Terrance, how do you feel about that?
You know, I have to say, it depends on, I want to say depends on the project, but again, that could just be, I could see this being a quick, I just don't want someone using stock footage, taking away from the company or the client's stance if they are true LGBTQ plus warriors, and they have, you know, they're doing the work, they are out here in the community, and it's a project that there's low budget on, low staff, and stock footage is kind of the only go-to to execute a project. So I'm not gonna say it's tokenism right away. If you can't use stock footage, you should not, you know, go that route. But if it happens, I don't think a brand should be, you know, not held accountable, but they definitely shouldn't lose, you know, everything over. There shouldn't be an uproar. I think they should have a platform to explain themselves if someone does feel strongly about it.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear you kind of like break that apart from different layers too, because there's like so many things you have to consider before you like truly label that tokenism, right? And I see some of you guys like nodding your head in agreement. Is that kind of like the general consensus, or does anybody feel a little bit differently or have any thoughts to add to what Terrance was saying?
I love, first off, that you asked, is it ever not tokenism? Like Chandler Bing would have asked. That was super fun. Also, I keep thinking of this question and the last question. It's like, no one is tokenized if you're giving them power. Like, it's like, okay, like you can have stock footage that like is inherently not tokenistic if it is made by members of that community. Like that's what we're talking about in terms of the media representation. It's like if you let people tell their own stories, okay, it's inherently not tokenism. And by the way, if you've created, you know, stock footage representative of your company where the people of your company, the diverse people of your company led that discussion, it's cool. How do you make someone not feel tokenized at work? Instead of saying like, oh, by the way, I need to understand queer people. Can you please educate me? It's like, thank you. The burden of education. But if you tell me that I'm in position to lead with the information I'm giving you because you know I'm the expert, then that is not tokenism. So it's like, it's okay to call upon people of a community to represent that community as long as, one, you understand they're not a monolith, and two, as long as you understand that like you need to put them in a position of power to determine policy based on their perspective, instead of just saying, please inform our narrative or do for us what we don't.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you kind of nailed it on the head there with like, if this is what we're going to do, we need to at least have people as a part of this community producing this work and making this work possible, for it to really truly not be something that goes along the lines of tokenism. Thank you for sharing that. Those were really two interesting perspectives to hear. Did anyone else want to add any perspective on that question?
I loved your point, Graham, on if you're able to use, original photography and making sure that rather than just grabbing some sort of stock image, if budget does allow, of making sure that it is authentic and that it is someone from within that community representing that picture of someone. Because if you're using a stock photo of someone in a wheelchair representing the disability community, you better hope that same guy didn't do a photo shoot catching a football while he's running on a field, because then all of a sudden you have just lost the authenticity of both of those campaigns and those images that you're putting out there. So, Terrance, to your point, absolutely. If budget doesn't allow, and the best that you could do is let's look at some stock imagery and see what we could do to make sure people are represented and we're not just sticking in one lane, then do it. But if you have that opportunity and you have a client that's willing to put in those extra dollars, and you have the chance to bring in members of that community to represent that community, that's golden.
Absolutely. Super important considerations from all of you across the board.
There is, by the way, Fern, it's really interesting. The dynamics of what you're talking about also come from a self-identification issue too. So there's a lot of, okay, well, so I want the people from that community to come forth. I want someone who is part of that community to make that. Until a certain Supreme Court ruling, it was harder for us to raise our hands and say, we're a part of that community. So a lot of these existing pools of that stock photography didn't have the means by which to safely let people say, I'm a part of that community. And now I think we're going to probably see a lot of changes.
That is an excellent point, and we sure hope so. But thank you for surfacing that. Super interesting to think about. Anybody else? Awesome, guys. I'm going to segue here to kind of the closing section of at least our discussion. If anybody else wanted to add any other questions in the Q&A, feel free to go ahead and do so. Otherwise, I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this discussion tonight, not only did we want this to be an authentic conversation that, again, was thought-provoking, but we wanted this to be action-oriented, and we want you as the audience to walk away and to feel empowered to make change tomorrow. It's from a year from now, a decade from now, using the tools and hearing the information and the perspectives that you've heard tonight. So thank you again, panelists. So I've got one question that I want to ask all of you, and you feel free to kind of elaborate as you please. But we've discussed a lot of things tonight, and I really want to make we talked about things that we can stop doing, that organizations can stop doing. There's a lot of things that we want to see people stop doing, but there are a lot of things that we can focus on, that we can start doing to impact change, like I said, tomorrow. And again, we want people to feel empowered within their organizations to make this change, whether you're executive level or junior level, there is an opportunity to impact change. So panelists, my question for you is, what do we start doing today to impact the change that we want to see, specifically with the LGBTQIA+ community and in our workplaces? Fern, what do we start doing?
So I thought about this quite a bit, Drew, and I wanted to make it, something that was clear in terms of what's something that I could do that doesn't, might not require, it's just me kind of, looking at it from kind of my own perspective. And I think that the number one thing that we can all do is really confront your own prejudice and your own bias and be willing to have conversations with others, even if it's uncomfortable. I feel like, so much can be accomplished through just kind of an internal reflection and through conversation. And that's something we don't seem to be doing a whole lot of in the world today. And it's having that conversation and listening to others and acknowledging your own maybe uncomfortable thoughts or feelings. And I think by starting there, you're showing that you are willing to learn more about yourself, more willing to learn about others. And I think that is just a great starting place. It doesn't, require any books. It doesn't require any other tools other than just kind of looking at yourself and perhaps looking at your conversations and relationships with others.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, confronting your own prejudice, it kind of like leans into that notion of like vulnerability too, just to become a better you in the workplace and for those that you work with. So having that conversation really is like so important. Graham, what can we start doing?
I think this sounds like a generic answer. I think we could start being friends to each other, and I mean that in a very specific way, and that is not another Chandler reference. I think of the fact that I think of this. My ex a long time ago, his truck needed jumping. It died. He called, and so I remember this is during the summer in Chicago, like everyone's partying. He calls his friends who are bad friends, and he goes, "I need a jump for my car," and they go, "No, we're at this party right now. But oh, by the way, when you get that sorted out, come to this party." And he's like crying. It was just so upsetting. It's like, and I'm like, that's kind of what I see. I can't like get that story out of my head during this month because everyone invites us to a party, and we're telling them that we need our car jumped. Like, we need help paying our bills. We don't feel safe. We're not getting home okay. Like, we need political activism. We need all this thing. Like, it's sort of funny because we talk so much about listening and screaming what we need. We need help. So, there's a lot of talk in our industry about brand love. And I actually, right before this call, thought of the song, Michael Bolton's "How Can We Be Lovers If We Can't Be Friends?" Like, how could we ever love you when you won't come jump our car? How could we come to your party? So like, be a friend to us, listen to what we're screaming at you, which is very easy to do, and switch to handling the unfun problem, which is like, the party isn't fun enough. We need to add to it. Like, be our friend.
Be our friend. And your comment, it just kind of fits so perfectly in the theme of our conversation, pride beyond the party. So thank you for sharing that and like truly making that full circle. But it is so important to consider, become our friend, go above and beyond, look beyond the fun, look beyond the party, because true, authentic, genuine relationships really need more nurturing than that. And they need more, it's so important to focus on that. So Graham, thank you for sharing that. Jordan, I want to hear about what you think we can start doing.
Oh boy, it's so hard to follow those responses. So Graham and Fern, thank you so much for those. So something that we always need to keep in mind is that it's not enough to just show up for the issues and topics that impact us personally. We need to show up for the communities that we may not consider ourselves to be a part of. So for example, I'm gay, I'm Latina, I'm a woman. Those things are really important, but I also need to be showing up for the Black community and the trans community and the Muslim community, the disabled community. The list goes on and on and on. We need to be for each other, and that's really, really important. And on that note, I just want to name that y'all, and I'm using y'all ironically because I'm from Colorado, but the trans community really needs us right now, because 2021 was it has been a record-breaking year in terms of the quantity of legislation that are a direct attack on the rights of the transgender community. And 33 states introduced more than 100 bills attacking the transgender community. So we must do all that we can to protect the trans community. So as I've been saying, contact your local legislators when you see legislation that is harmful to these communities. You can do this with your local officials or even out-of-state officials as well. We need to troll them as much as possible. So it's important that they hear from us. So without further ado, and I'm going to put these in the chat, I want to recommend some local organizations that you can support today that are advocating for the trans community, including the Don't Look Back Center, the Colorado Name Change Project, the Transgender Center of the Rockies, and also Sparta. So let's support the trans community. It needs the support.
Jordan, thank you so much for sharing that. so important to show up for all of these communities. And like you said, specifically the trans community, it's more important than ever right now. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing the resources with us today. Vanellope, what do we start doing?
I think getting along, educating ourselves, doing more for the trans community, doing, well, not just for my community, for all communities, you know, but as Jordan was saying, and by the way, I really appreciate, I didn't realize that you were so educated on it. Thank you. But yeah, just getting along and educating yourself, getting to know us, be our friend, be there for us, and not just saying I support you and oh you're my friend, you know, doing more. So yeah.
Thank you, Vanellope. Yeah, and I think this all just ties back to something we're saying. I mean, again, I'm identifying these key findings through our conversation. Just listen, learn, and do something action oriented. You know, if you really want to be the advocate, and if you really want to start doing something, and it might not look like action the first day. You know, you might need to take a step back and really learn. And educate yourself before you can truly be like an action-oriented advocate for the community and the communities. So super helpful to hear that. Terrance, you're last up here. We're excited to hear from you on what you think we can start doing.
Yeah, you guys really killed it, each and every one of you. And I just want to say again, it's been a real honor just hearing everyone's perspective and seeing all of your approaches and your respective roles. So thank you. But I think something you know that we can start doing that kind of amplifies everyone else's message is that, are we creating the spaces to develop those friendships, to really see what issues are impacting everyone? Because sometimes you may be a person in one of these communities, you may not even know what you need. You know, there are certain things that that's just your way of life. You never even knew that another way was possible. So if you have that ability and that privilege to be able to help someone identify that, do that. You know, and we can make more environments in the workplace and out of the workplace to be a bit more comfortable with one another, to be vulnerable, to share stories. You know, before we're professionals, before we're panelists, we're human first. And I think that we're going to find a lot more in common than a lot of the things that we don't have in common. So I think that is just having that mindset going into a lot of these conversations would help us all out a bit more. And I think anyone else who could be touched by each and every one of our messages.
Absolutely. And you're right. Everyone is just different and we all have a different story. And it kind of goes back to to intersectionality as a topic as well. And we really need to start acknowledging that topic and fully integrating it throughout the work we do from start to finish. So thank you for sharing that, Terrance. We've got one more Q&A question coming in here. I think we've got time to get to it. So I'm gonna offer this one up, and whoever wants to hop in to answer it, we'll go ahead and do that. So that question was actually removed from the Q&A. So it looks like that might have been our wrap up. So I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everyone for joining us today. This was a super, well, here we go. We've got the question, folks. What a little cliffhanger here. I'm gonna pop it right in. Sorry for the confusion there. As an advertising industry or any industry, how do we hire and bring in a more diverse workforce when it seems taboo to discuss during the hiring process? Super interesting question. Again, I'm going to open this one up to any of the panelists who would like to answer.
I put a book in the chat because I helped edit a book on this subject. It's if I were to give which I never thought I'd be editing, and it was a very exciting process. But the gist of the book is that there's so many different parts of the process where diversity gets lost. It's in what you're putting out on the website so they can even see you, the wording on the job description, the questions you are or aren't asking during the interview process, the biases that get brought to the selection process. And it's sort of funny because you bring up like how taboo it is, and it's like, well, you might have addressed it in the job description and then never in the interview thing, because I can't touch the interview process. So even if you like touch one part of it, you've got another part. So the blanket answer is to sort of start to map all the different places and see where bias lives in them, to do this with upper level management and then the DEI natives that we talked about, the less tenured folks, and then to start going, okay, cool, now this is how we can like eliminate bias because we've mapped out this process. There's no one place to fix it. Sorry, I get very excited about this because I loved working on this book.
Well, and we obviously love to hear your perspective and your expertise in this area, Graham. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we will be checking that out. So thanks for dropping that.
Yeah, Arthur and Susanna wrote a great book.
Anybody else want to add anything there? Well, that was super helpful to kind of hear from you, Graham, and great question coming in. Great questions all around from the Q&A tonight. So thank you very, very much for joining us and for engaging with us throughout the show. Again, just thank you, Add2, for putting on such an interesting event for us. This is really nice for us to be able to get together virtually, bring people from different locations and different perspectives together to celebrate not only our community, but the advertising and marketing community as a whole. Thank you, panelists, so much for dedicating time and space for this to come into your lives, and for engaging with me tonight. This has been so much fun, and I've really had a pleasure getting to know each and every one of you. So just thank you. And don't forget, for those of you who are still on, Add2 Colorado is very active, so feel free to catch them across all of their social properties. And then you might know me as a familiar face. I'm serving on the board for Ad Club Colorado, so I hope to cross paths with many of you, hopefully in person in the future. So thank you very much. It looks like we've got about 30 minutes left on the event time. As a reminder, the panelists will be hanging out in our Remo conference room at various tables. If you would like to have the chance to chat with them or ask any other questions, they're going to be hanging out for a little bit. So just thank you guys all around, and I hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month and a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Drew. Great job.